Overall, most of us probably draw from photos more than from any other source material. And with photographic images available online from all over the world in just about any sort of subject material we could think of, it's an easy and cheap way to do it. So why wouldn't we? But sadly, the results so often are at best boring and at worst disappointing. Just not quite looking right at all. Now, this could be simply from a lack of drawing skill and experience, but I suspect far more often it's from a lack of appreciation of the possibilities that photos give us as artists to create really effective and satisfying and attention-grabbing drawings. Let me quickly share 8 ways that are available to every artist to improve on the drawing by improving on the photo that they're using. And if this is an issue for you, whatever you do, don't miss the final point I make after the 8th point, where I summarize in a nutshell why I think these problems happen, why often the results of drawing from a photo can look lifeless and boring. But the first point is something that we need to understand about photos. And that's that photos have weaknesses that can trap us, that can make producing a successful drawing more difficult. And particularly, photos capture overwhelming detail, far too much detail than we can possibly draw, perhaps even far more detail than we can take in. And it simply becomes too difficult to draw. It's a distracting amount of detail to think about, to try and process, and to capture in ink on paper. But further, photos flatten. Photos capture a very two-dimensional view, a very flat view. Whatever depths we have are compressed so that they seem far more next to each other. Detail that's a long way away can look just as clear, albeit a bit smaller, than detail which is closer. And this is not the effect that we get in life. And a photo, of course, may be simply a poor photo. It may be a poor photo in composition, in the lighting that was happening at the time. Possibly the subject isn't pulled together very well, or the printing or the editing can lack clarity. So we have to challenge our photo reference. We have to challenge what we're seeing and ask, does it have the potential at least? We have to challenge our photo and ask, is it adequate for a good drawing, or does it at least have the potential for a good drawing? And these next points are how we make sure our photo delivers the goals of a great drawing. Beginner or less experienced drawers probably won't think that this point is particularly important at all for them. And yet, this is the point that everything in my drawing hinges on. And that is, what is the purpose of my drawing? What am I trying to achieve with my drawing at the end? What do I want to have on my paper at the end? How do I want people who look at my drawing to engage with it? What's the connection I want my drawing to have? And this, of course, will actually help me choose a photo that is appropriate, a photo that can achieve what I'm wanting. Because if I have no aim, no purpose, no goal in my drawing, there is probably a good chance that it's going to end up looking rather boring, rather mediocre, rather just in the middle at best. And if you're not sure what I mean by purpose, here are some possible examples that a drawing I do might have. I might want to showcase a subject that I love, such as architecture, or a city I really enjoy, such as here in Berlin. I may want to, for some reason, demonstrate my skill as an artist, to impress, possibly to use as an advertisement. It may actually be, if you like, a sales pitch for a drawing course I have on offer, or free YouTube videos I have available. It may be that I want to create a narrative, a story that I invite the viewer into, that I draw in such a way that they're going to want to, if you like, wander into my drawing or wander along my drawing in some way, and in their imagination discover beyond what I've even drawn. It may be that I choose a reference because it will give me an opportunity to explain some technical skill such as hatching and cross-hatching, whether it's in a small natural subject such as this pine cone, or something a little more complex and grandiose such as this Habsburg imperial eagle. Having a purpose in my drawing lets me both choose a reference that has potential, but it also gives me a focus when I'm actually drawing to enhance the aspects or factors within this scene that will bring out the purposes I have at the start. The third point when we draw from a photo is that we need to understand that the photo is our starting point. We're not slaves to it. So we look at the composition and we ask ourselves, bearing in mind our purpose, can I crop this in a way to bring out more, to make more effective the qualities I want in my drawing? With this scene, I love the architecture of this curving street, particularly with this building here curving around and just the edge of the Pantheon in Paris. And yet I felt this was too wide an expanse of empty space in the front. And so I cropped it. And I gave myself a much tighter focus on the architecture and the contrast with this massive column much closer to us. How much we crop depends on our reference and how suitable it is and what we want to achieve. It may be a little, it may just be on one edge, or it may be a lot. It may be on all four sides as here. And we can do it for a number of reasons to get a better balance of the qualities that we want to showcase in our drawing, to get a better focus of particular elements in our scene. We may do it simply because what's here is too difficult for us to draw well. Or it may be we're removing repetition to create more interest and variation in what we have. And it may be because we actually, for the size of our drawing, want to enlarge what we draw. Because when I shrink the size of my reference, in effect, I'm enlarging my drawing of what's left. Of this scene, this was my drawing. And I think far more interesting by condensing the architecture and the streetscape into a tighter area, which still maintains the interest of the varying architecture, this curving street here and the contrast of the columns of the Pantheon. But the fourth point is I don't just have the opportunity to crop, but I actually also have the opportunity, even the obligation, to make changes to create a better drawing, to make changes that will more bring out the purposes that I have for my scene. I can add, I can remove, I can move around, I can simplify, I can enhance, I can emphasize various subjects and qualities within my scene so that it works better. I rearranged these figures because when I cropped, these ones all disappeared. These ones were too close and too prominent and took focus away from the architecture. I moved these ones slightly to the right. These two figures I moved slightly to the right. Two of these three figures who were cropped out, I moved to here, and I eliminated one completely. This figure here, I moved along somewhat and turned slightly. But it wasn't just the figures I changed. I liked the perspective effect of these three Parisian lampposts. But one of them had now been cut out. So I slid it along and drew it here, making adjustment for the perspective so that the perspective angle linking these three lampposts stayed consistent. But it's very hard to know what choices to make if I don't have a strong sense of what in my subject, what in my reference is attracting me that I want to showcase in my drawing. And I hope you're finding these points helpful. And if you are, please, why not hit the like button right now and help me out as well? But it's not just objects within our reference that we can change or where the borders and boundaries of our scene are. We can play around with the values, and by values, I mean the darks and the lights. And if we have a digital copy, then it really is an obligation to play around with it. And by just sliding the indicators to increase the darkness or to overexpose and see what we see in our reference, overexposing will let us see into areas of darkness that really are quite hidden, or we can deliberately darken the darkest areas to create possibly a more dramatic effect that may actually capture the purpose for our drawing more, that actually gives us a better reference to work from for what we want to achieve with our finished drawing. And you can see why we need to ask ourselves at the very start, what am I trying to achieve with my drawing? Because it will guide so many possibilities and options and decisions that we can make. And by darkening our darks, we in effect increase the effect of our lights. And when our lights are sunshine, we increase the effect of a bright sunny day. And this can also, from a technical point of view, give us an opportunity to show detail clearly that would otherwise be lost if the values were more the same, were more a middle range of values. It makes drawing with a clarity that would be impossible if overall the values were lighter. It's the impact, it's the results of our finished drawing that we need to be concerned about, and which at some stage becomes our total focus. Once from my reference, I've worked out what sort of effects I want to capture in my drawing, then we come to the next stage of how will I capture, what marks and lines will I use to create the effect in my reference that will deliver the focus, the purpose for the drawing that I decided right at the very beginning. And what I do in every drawing is I spend 2 or 3 minutes experimenting with marks and lines, and also exploring sometimes contrasts, such as between these natural foliage shapes and the lines of this man-made bridge, to see if the marks I have in mind in my head are going to create the effect I want. And I do that before I commit to the drawing. But it's not just the marks I'm going to use to capture a certain effect, it's also the materials I'm going to use as well. This is a rather more detailed example of this process. But I wasn't just exploring the marks, I was exploring the thickness of the pens to transition from these very close, small box hedges to these larger but further away trees, and these still larger and yet further distant trees. The effect of moving from closer to distance is an important part in my thinking of the interest of this that I identified at the very start made me want to draw it, and therefore I had to work out how from this reference I could translate this, transfer this onto paper. A few minutes exploring allows me to be more confident with the actual drawing. And it's not just natural tree foliage subjects we need to explore marks, because we need to create effects with any subject we draw. In the reference, it was the relationship between this old wharf jutting into Sydney Harbour and the skyscrapers on the other side in North Sydney, contrasting with the trees on the northern foreshore, and the effect of the shadows in the harbour under the supporting piers of the wharf, I thought were of great interest, and that was the effect I wanted to create. And therefore, a few minutes of exploratory mark making told me whether I could actually capture that effect to my satisfaction in the time I had available. And the final thing to consider is, just because a photo has a hard edge doesn't mean we have to draw one in. Now, we may decide that that creates an effect which again works in with our purpose, our focus. But it may be that we create a different effect in order to showcase the focus that we have, our purpose for the drawing. So we leave out detail and we let the showcased object actually define the outer edges of the drawing. It doesn't have to be a single object where we leave our edges somewhat more loosely. And we can do it to exaggerate or to highlight a certain element, such as perspective angles, or it could be something in between, loose edging, but without a rigid tightness to the lines that can't help but attract attention to themselves. So what's the reason I think so many drawings from photos end up looking a bit on the boring, mediocre side? And I think it's because without realizing it, we have a focus, but it's not one that we've, if you like, deliberately chosen. And that's our focus is to copy the photo as closely as we can. That our success or failure will be measured by how closely our drawing resembles the photograph. And in doing so, even if we succeed in doing that, we also succeed in copying the weaknesses of the photo. Those elements that we mentioned at the start, which are actually a weakness of a photo compared to the possibilities that we as artists have at our disposal. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Hope you found this interesting. Drawing from photos is probably unavoidable, but it's actually a great way to draw in its own right. But we have to free ourselves from feeling obliged to copying the photo. And I really hope this video helps to empower us all to do that. But look, whatever you draw from, and however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.